The knock came just after Nathan Quade set the lantern on the porch hook. The same lantern his brother had lit every night for 23 years, until the fever stopped his hands for good. Nathan paused with his fingers still on the brass, the metal warm from the candle inside. Past midnight, no moon, and the orchard stretched black in all directions. He turned toward the sound. A figure stood at the edge of the lantern glow, hunched against the cold. Green skin, darker where rain had soaked through a wool cloak that had seen better seasons. Tusks, small and white, caught the light when she raised her head. "I need shelter," she said. Not a question. Nathan looked past her into the darkness, then back. She was tall, broader through the shoulders than most human women, with pointed ears pressed flat against her skull from the wet. Her eyes held his without blinking. "Storm coming?" he asked. "No." She shifted the pack on her back. "We were crossing the ford at Ember Creek when the water rose. We scattered. We agreed to regroup at the first light we found." Nathan understood then what the lantern had done. "How many of you?" 10. She glanced behind her. "The others will come." He should have asked more. Should have asked why they were running, who they were running from, what trouble might follow. Instead he stepped aside and gestured toward the door. "Barn is warmer. I have blankets out there." "The barn is acceptable." She moved past him, her boots squelching water onto his porch boards. At the threshold she paused. "Thank you." She did not give her name, and he did not ask. He showed her to the barn, brought her 2 wool blankets and a portion of bread and hard cheese, then returned to the house. The lantern stayed lit. The second knock came an hour later. This one was younger, shivering so hard her teeth clacked behind her tusks. Nathan gave her the same directions to the barn and another share of food. The third arrived near dawn, limping from a twisted ankle. The fourth and fifth came together, holding each other upright. By the time the sun cleared the eastern hills, 8 orc women occupied his barn. Nathan had gone through most of his bread and all of his spare blankets. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the depleted shelf, calculating. His harvest was 3 weeks late, and half of it still hung rotting on the branch because he could not pick fast enough alone. The payment to his cousin Edmund was due in 2 months. The first frost would come sooner. He had been doing this arithmetic every night since his brother died. The numbers never improved. The 9th orc woman appeared mid-morning while Nathan was hauling water from the well. She was older, gray threading through her black hair, and she carried herself with the careful dignity of someone who had walked too far on too little food. "The others are here?" she asked. "In the barn?" She nodded and went without another word. Nathan watched her go, then returned to his work. The apples would not wait. He was in the north orchard when the 10th knock finally came, but he did not hear it. He only learned of her arrival when he returned to the barn at dusk to tell his unexpected guests that he could spare a pot of stew for dinner. They had organized themselves in his absence. Blankets hung from the rafters to create partitions. The injured one sat with her ankle wrapped and elevated. The rest had gathered in a loose circle around a woman Nathan had not seen before. She was different from the others. Willowy where they were sturdy, with fine bones in her face and hands made for delicate work. She looked exhausted, deep shadows beneath her eyes, but she stood straight and held a leather-bound book against her chest like a shield. "You are the owner of this land," she said when she saw him. Not a question. Nathan Quade. "I am Kira Hallow. These are my sisters," she gestured to the others. "Not by blood, by craft. We are weavers of the Ember clan." She paused. "We were the ford," Nathan said. "The Blackthorn clan took our lodge 3 days ago. We had time to run, but not to fight." Her fingers tightened on the book. "This is our pattern ledger, 4 generations of designs. It was the only thing I could carry." Nathan looked at the 10 faces watching him. different ages, different builds, all wearing the same exhaustion and weariness. "You are welcome to shelter while you need it," he said. "I can offer food, but not much. The harvest is poor this year." Kira's eyes narrowed slightly. "We will not take charity, we can work. I have no money to pay wages. We require room and food, nothing more." She opened the ledger, showing pages covered in meticulous drawings and notes. "We can keep accounts, we can organize, we can pick fruit." She glanced at the others, who nodded. "We will leave in spring when the road's clear and we can travel safely north to my mother's cousin in Greenbend. Until then, we will earn what you give us." Nathan should have refused. 10 more mouths meant his stores would never last the winter. It meant more risk, more complication, more of everything he could not afford. But his apples were rotting and his accounts were a mess, and his brother's lantern had called them here. "The harvest has to be finished in 3 weeks," he said. "After that, I do not know what work there will be. Then we start tomorrow." Kira closed the ledger. "Thank you, Nathan Quade." The next morning, Nathan woke to find all 10 women already in the orchard. Kira had organized them into teams: 4 picking, 2 sorting, 2 hauling, 1 managing the count, and 1 preparing breakfast over a fire they had built in a clear space behind the barn. The injured one kept the tallies, her wrapped ankle propped on a stool. Nathan stood at the edge of the north orchard and watched them work. They moved with efficiency born of long practice working together, calling to each other in their own language, a rapid musical tongue full of hard consonants. The pickers used his ladders and filled his baskets faster than he had managed alone in a week. The sorters divided the fruit into 3 categories: market good, cider worthy, and rot. The haulers carried the filled baskets to the sorting station without breaking stride. Kira worked among the pickers, her slim build deceiving. She climbed the ladders with quick confidence and her hands moved steadily through the branches. When she noticed Nathan watching, she paused. "Do we work incorrectly?" she called down. "No," he said. "You work well." "Then help us." "We need more baskets." He did. For the first time in months, Nathan worked without the weight of impossibility pressing on his shoulders. The job was still too large, the time still too short, but with 11 pairs of hands instead of 1, the numbers began to shift. They finished the north orchard in 4 days. The east orchard took 3. By the end of the 2nd week, they had picked, sorted, and stored more salvageable fruit than Nathan had dared hope for. The rot pile was massive, but the cider apples alone would cover his immediate expenses. Kira kept the accounts. Every evening she sat in the barn with the ledger open and marked down the day's count in neat columns. Nathan brought his own record book one night, the pages chaotic with crossed-out numbers and margin notes in his brother's handwriting. Kira looked at it for a long moment. "May I?" she asked. He handed it over. She turned pages slowly, her expression unreadable. Finally she said, "Your system is not a system, I know. Who kept this before? My brother, he understood it. I do not." Kira nodded slowly. "I can translate this into something usable, if you permit me. Please." She worked on it over the next several evenings, asking him questions about dates and quantities, cross-referencing his notes with the physical evidence of stores and equipment. Gradually, a picture emerged from the chaos. Nathan's farm was larger than he had realized and poorer. His brother had been borrowing from the next season to cover the last, robbing future harvests to pay present debts, a slow spiral that the fever had simply accelerated. "This payment to Edmund Quade," Kira said one night, pointing to a line in the ledger. "Your cousin, he holds the mortgage. My grandfather took the loan to buy the West Orchard. Edmund inherited the note when his father died. The interest is high, I know." Kira ran her finger down the column of payments. "And this clause about tenancy." Nathan leaned over to look. "What clause?" She turned the book so he could read it. There in his brother's handwriting, dated 2 years ago, tenancy clause accepted per E. Quad terms, all non-family residents subject to approval and removal. I have never seen that before, Nathan said. It was not in the original loan. My grandfather would never have agreed to that. This land has always employed seasonal workers, travelers. Half the harvest depends on it. He stared at the line. My brother must have added it when he renegotiated. Or someone else added it after, Kira said quietly. Nathan looked at her. Why would Edmund do that? I cannot say. But if this clause is valid, your cousin has the right to remove any non-family residents from this land, including us. She closed the book. We should finish the harvest quickly. They did. The last apple came off the last tree on a cold morning with frost on the ground. Nathan stood in the empty orchard and felt something close to pride. The barn was full, the cider press working, the market good fruit already sold to a merchant from the southern towns. The payment to Edmund would be made with a week to spare. That afternoon, Edmund arrived. He rode up on a gray mare, dressed in fine wool and leather gloves, his face flushed from the cold. Nathan met him in the yard. Cousin, Edmund said, dismounting, I came to discuss your payment. It is ready. Come inside. Edmund's eyes tracked to the barn where several of the orc women were working, then back to Nathan. I see you have taken on help. Seasonal workers. The harvest required it. Seasonal workers, Edmund repeated. He smiled, and Nathan felt his stomach tighten. I am afraid we must discuss the tenancy clause. I know of no such clause. Edmund produced a folded paper from his coat. Your brother signed this amendment 2 years ago. It states clearly that all residents of this property, family or otherwise, must have my approval as the mortgage holder. I do not recall approving these creatures. Nathan took the paper. The handwriting looked like his brother's, but something about the ink seemed wrong, too dark, too fresh. This is a forgery. It is a legal document with your brother's signature. My brother would not have agreed to this. Your brother agreed to many things in his final years. The farm was failing. He was desperate. Edmund gestured toward the barn. Regardless, the clause is now in effect. These orcs must leave, or I will invoke my right to foreclose immediately. The payment is ready. You have no grounds. I have every grounds. The mortgage terms are clear. Violation of tenancy is grounds for immediate forfeiture. Edmund's smile widened. Of course, I am not an unreasonable man. Remove them by week's end and we will forget this happened. He left before Nathan could respond. Nathan stood in the yard, holding the forged document, his hands shaking with anger. Kira found him there an hour later. I heard, she said. I will fight this. The Reeve can review the document. Your cousin holds the debt. The Reeve will take his word over yours. She looked tired. We will leave tomorrow. You have done more than enough for us. No. Nathan folded the paper and slid it into his pocket. He is stealing this land the same way the Blackthorn clan stole your lodge. I will not let him. This is not your fight. It is exactly my fight. This is my land. My family's land. He met her eyes. And you are my guests. I will not turn you out to satisfy a forgery. Kira studied him for a long moment. Then we fight carefully, she said, and we use what we have. What do we have? She smiled, small and sharp. Records. The Reeve arrived 4 days later, summoned by Edmund's formal complaint. His name was Thomas Farrow, a gray-haired man with ink-stained fingers and a reputation for caring more about law than politics. He set up his table in Nathan's kitchen and called both parties to present their case. Edmund arrived with the forged tenancy amendment and a ledger of his own, documenting the loan payments and terms. He spoke smoothly, gesturing to the papers with confidence. The terms are simple, Edmund said. My cousin has violated a clear provision of his mortgage by housing unauthorized residents. I am within my rights to foreclose. Reeve Farrow examined the amendment. This appears to be properly executed. It is a forgery, Nathan said. Can you prove that? Nathan hesitated. Edmund's smile returned. Then Kira stepped forward. She carried the pattern ledger and Nathan's account book, both open to marked pages. May I speak, Reeve Farrow? Farrow glanced at Edmund, who stiffened. The orc has no standing in this matter. She is a resident of the property in question, Farrow said. I will hear her. He nodded to Kira. Go on. Kira set both books on the table. I have been organizing Nathan Quade's records for the past month. In doing so, I reviewed all documents related to the mortgage, including payment histories and correspondence. She pointed to a page in Nathan's book. This is the record of mortgage payments for the past 5 years, kept by Nathan's brother in his own hand. The handwriting is consistent throughout. She slid the forged amendment next to it. This amendment is dated 2 years ago. The handwriting appears similar, but the ink is wrong. Look at the oxidation. Farrow leaned close, comparing the two documents. The old entries in Nathan's book had faded to a brownish hue. The amendment was still dark black. Ink oxidizes over time, Kira continued. A 2-year-old document should show significant fading. This does not. It was written recently. Edmund's face had gone red. This is absurd. You would take the word of an orc over legal documentation. I am taking evidence over assertion, Farrow said mildly. He looked at Kira. Is there more? Yes. Kira opened Edmund's ledger. This is the loan payment record provided by Edmund Quade. It shows a balance of 840 silver. But according to the receipts Nathan's brother kept, the actual payments total 912 silver. She laid out a series of small paper slips, each marked with dates and amounts. Edmund has been underreporting payments and pocketing the difference. The room went silent. Farrow picked up the receipts one by one, comparing them to Edmund's ledger. His expression darkened. Cousin, Edmund said, turning to Nathan, you cannot believe this. These are clearly fabrications. These are your father's receipts, Nathan said. I recognize his seal. Farrow set down the last receipt. Edmund Quade, these are serious accusations. You have an explanation for these discrepancies. Edmund opened his mouth, closed it, then grabbed for his ledger. This is a mistake in transcription, nothing more. A mistake totaling 72 silver. Farrow's voice was cold now. And the forged amendment. Another mistake. I did not forge anything. That document is legitimate. Then you will not mind if I send it to the guild scribes in Milford for verification of age and ink composition. Farrow began gathering the papers. Until then, I am suspending all foreclosure actions on this property. Furthermore, I am ordering a full audit of all loans you hold as mortgage keeper. If additional discrepancies are found, you will face charges of fraud. Edmund's face had gone from red to white. You have no authority to demand an audit. I have every authority. I am the reeve of this district and you are a creditor under my jurisdiction. Farrow stood. You may leave now. Edmund looked at Nathan, his expression venomous, then stormed out. The door slammed behind him. Farrow turned to Nathan and Kira. The audit will take several weeks. I suggest you keep detailed records of everything until it is complete. He nodded to Kira. Your work is meticulous. If you ever need employment, the district office could use someone with your skills. Thank you, Kira said. But I will be leaving in spring. Something in her voice made Nathan's chest tighten. He had been trying not to think about spring. Farrow left with the documents. The orc women emerged from the barn where they had been waiting and Kira told them what had happened. There was relief, some laughter, a brief moment of celebration. Then they returned to work. Winter was coming and there was still much to do. The audit took 6 weeks. When the results arrived, they confirmed what Kira had found. Edmund had been systematically underreporting payments and inflating balances across 4 different loans. The total theft exceeded 300 silver. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to repay the stolen amounts plus damages. The mortgage on Nathan's land was declared satisfied in full. Nathan owned his farm outright for the first time in 3 generations. He should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt the days slipping away like water through his fingers. Winter came hard and cold. The orc women stayed in the barn, insulated with straw and warmed by a fire Nathan helped them build. They worked on smaller tasks, repairing tools, mending fences, carding wool that Nathan had purchased with his harvest surplus. Kira kept the accounts and planned their journey north. "Green Bend is 2 weeks' travel in good weather," she told Nathan one evening. "We will need to leave by early spring to arrive before the planting season. My mother's cousin runs a weaving house there. She can take us all on." "That is good," Nathan said. He did not feel good about it. Kira looked at him, her dark eyes searching. "You have been quiet lately, I have been thinking." About what? He should have lied. Should have said the farm, the accounts, the next harvest. Instead he said, about how empty the barn will be in spring. Kira's hand stilled on the ledger she had been writing in. "We agreed. Spring. We cannot stay here permanently." "Why not?" "Because this is not our land. Because we are not your family. Because we have imposed enough." "You saved my harvest. You saved my land. You have imposed nothing." Nathan leaned forward. "I have more space than I need and more work than I can manage alone. You have skills I lack and need for stability. This could be a partnership." "We are orcs, Nathan. You are human. People here barely tolerate us now. If we stayed permanently, the trouble would never end." "Let it come. I do not care what people think." "You should." Kira closed the ledger. "I will not build a life for my sisters on hope and defiance. They have lost enough. They need safety, not another battle." "Then what do you need?" he asked. She met his eyes, and for a moment he saw past the careful leadership to the exhaustion beneath. "I need to know they will be safe, that they will have a place that cannot be taken from them, that they will not wake up one morning to find everything gone again." Her voice softened. "I cannot give them that here." Nathan wanted to argue, wanted to promise her that he could protect them, that the law would shield them, that nothing bad would happen. But he had learned enough to know that promises were not the same as plans. So instead he said, "What if they had land?" Kira blinked. "What? The valley north of here. It borders my property, but it is crown land lying fallow. No one has worked it in 20 years. He was thinking as he spoke, the idea forming even as he voiced it. If someone petitioned the Reeve for a grant, someone with a legitimate craft and need, the Crown would likely approve it, especially if the petitioner had already demonstrated the ability to work the land productively. "You are suggesting we petition for a land grant." "I am suggesting you petition for a land grant, for your clan, a place that would be yours that no one could take from you." He gestured toward the window, toward the dark valley beyond. "It is good land. Water, timber, space enough for a lodge and weaving house both, and it would be close." "Close to you," Kira said. "Yes." He did not look away. "Close to me." She was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters and the fire crackled in the hearth. Finally, she said, "I will think about it." She did more than think. Over the next week, she walked the valley with Nathan, examining the soil and water and timber. She consulted with her sisters, long conversations in their own language that Nathan could not follow. She reviewed the legal requirements for Crown land grants with Reeve Pharaoh, who seemed surprised but not displeased by the idea. "The Crown encourages productive use of fallow land," Pharaoh told her. If you can demonstrate a viable plan and the means to execute it, I see no reason the grant would be denied, particularly given your contribution to resolving the Quad mortgage issue. Kira prepared the petition with the same meticulous care she brought to everything. She outlined the clan's history, their craft, their intentions for the land. She included letters of reference from Nathan and Pharaoh, testimonies from the merchants who had purchased Nathan's harvest, even a sample weaving from her pattern ledger. She submitted it in midwinter and waited. The answer came in early spring. Approved, with the condition that the clan construct permanent structures and demonstrate continuous occupation within 2 years. Nathan was in the orchard when Kira told him. She found him pruning the apple trees, preparing them for the new season, and she simply held out the letter without speaking. He read it twice to be certain he understood. "You have your land," he said. "We have our land," she corrected. "It was your idea. It was your work." He handed back the letter. "When will you start building?" "As soon as the ground thaws enough to dig foundations. The others are already drawing plans." She paused. "We will need help. Timber, tools, labor. I do not know how we will afford it all." "I have timber," Nathan said, "and tools. And labor if you need it. We cannot ask you to give more. You have already done so much. You are not asking, I am offering." He set down his pruning shears. "Besides, I have my own interest in this. Good neighbors raise property values." She smiled at that, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Is that what we are? Neighbors?" "I hope we are more than that," Nathan said quietly. "But neighbors is a start." The building began in late spring and continued through the summer. The 10 women worked alongside Nathan, felling trees and hauling stone, digging foundations and raising walls. Nathan hired 2 men from the village to help with the heavy timber work, paying them with silver from the previous harvest. The men grumbled about working for orcs, but they took the money and did the work. The lodge took shape slowly. A long, low building with a stone foundation and timber frame, designed to house the weaving looms on the ground floor and sleeping quarters above. Kira directed the construction with the same quiet authority she brought to everything, consulting her sisters on details, making adjustments as they went. Nathan watched her move through the worksite, conferring with the timber cutters, checking measurements, solving problems, and felt something settle in his chest. He had been alone for a long time. After the fever took his brother and parents, he had retreated into solitude, speaking to no one, seeing no one, simply existing in the space between planting and harvest. The orc women had broken that isolation not with force but with simple presence. They filled his barn with voices and his orchard with purpose. And Kira had given him something he had not known he was missing: partnership. He did not know when partnership had become something deeper. Perhaps it had been the night she sat up late helping him understand his own accounts. Perhaps it had been watching her climb the apple trees with quick, fearless grace. Perhaps it had been the moment she stood before the reeve and defended his land with nothing but logic and evidence. Or perhaps it had been all of it, a slow accumulation of small moments that added up to something inevitable. He only knew that when he imagined the farm without her, the numbers went wrong again. The lodge was nearly complete when Nathan made his decision. He waited until evening, until the others had gone inside and Kira was alone, checking the fit of the newly hung door. He walked across the fence line that separated his land from hers and stopped a few feet away. "It looks good," he said. She turned, surprised. "I did not hear you coming." "I wanted to talk to you." "About what?" He took a breath. This was harder than he had anticipated. "About us." Kira went very still. "Nathan. I know what you said before about safety and stability, about not building on hope and defiance." He stepped closer. "But I have been thinking about the arithmetic. The arithmetic, she repeated. 1 farm, 1 lodge, 11 people. The numbers make sense. We work well together. We understand each other. We could formalize it. A real partnership. He was talking too fast, the words spilling out. I am not saying it would be easy. People will talk. There will be trouble. But we have faced trouble before and we are still here. You are asking me to stay, Kira said softly. I am asking you to consider that you already have. You have land now, your own land right here. Your sisters are building a life. You have a place that cannot be taken from you. He met her eyes, and I am asking if that place might include me. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, I am afraid. Of what? Of choosing wrong. Of putting my own wants above my sister's needs. Of building something that will collapse the moment real pressure comes. She turned away. I have led them through so much already. I cannot afford to make a mistake now. It is not a mistake, Nathan said, and it is not just your wants. I want this too, I want you. The words came easier than he expected. I have been alone on that farm for 1.5 years and every day was the same. Then you arrived and everything changed. The work became easier. The future became clearer. I became better. He touched her shoulder gently. I do not know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Kira turned back to him, her eyes bright. This is not about arithmetic. No, he agreed. It is not. Then what is it about? He smiled. I think you know, she did. He could see it in her face, in the way her breath caught, in the way she leaned toward him without seeming to realize it. I am not easy to love, she warned. I am stubborn and I plan too much, and I do not always know when to stop working. I am not easy either. I am quiet and I think in numbers and I light lanterns at midnight for no good reason. That lantern brought us here. Then it was a very good reason. He reached for her hand. Kira Hallow, I am not asking you to choose between me and your sisters. I am asking you to choose a future where you can have both, where your lodge and my farm share a fence line and a life, where we build something together that belongs to all of us. She looked down at their joined hands, his skin pale against her green fingers. People will not approve. People rarely approve of anything worthwhile. The law may not recognize it. Then we will change the law. You already proved you are good at that, she laughed, a small surprised sound. You are serious about this, completely? You want to marry me? Yes. He said it simply, without hesitation. I want to marry you. Kira was quiet for a moment. Then she said, my sisters will have opinions. I imagine they will. They will want to be involved in the planning. That seems reasonable. They will probably insist on weaving your wedding clothes. I would be honored. She smiled, wide enough to show her tusks. Then yes, Nathan Quade, I will marry you. He kissed her there in the doorway of her unfinished lodge with the summer sun setting behind them and the smell of fresh cut timber in the air. It was not a gentle kiss. There was too much relief in it, too much joy, too much certainty finally found. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. We should tell the others, Kira said. We should. They did not move. Nathan slid his arms around her and she leaned against him, her head tucked beneath his chin. They stood like that for a long time, watching the light fade over the valley that was now hers, the orchard that was his, the fence line that connected them both. The sisters reacted exactly as Kira had predicted. There were tears and laughter and a flurry of plans. The oldest sister, whose name was Mara, embraced Nathan hard enough to crack his ribs. The youngest, Vera, immediately began sketching wedding garment designs. The injured one, Sola, whose ankle had long since healed, announced that she would handle the food and would accept no arguments. They set the date for midsummer, after the lodge was complete. Reeve Farrow agreed to officiate, bemused but willing. Nathan invited no one from the village. He had no family left, and his friendships had withered during his year of isolation. The wedding would be small. Just Nathan, Kira, her 9 sisters, and Pharaoh. The lodge was finished 3 days before the ceremony. The orc women moved their belongings from Nathan's barn to their new home, filling the space with looms and thread and the tools of their craft. Nathan helped carry the heavier equipment, marveling at the transformation. The building that had been bare timber and stone now hummed with purpose. Kira stood in the center of the main room, looking up at the rafters, and Nathan saw pride in her face. "We did it," she said. "You did it. We did it together." She turned to him. "Are you nervous about the wedding?" "No," he said truthfully. "Are you terrified?" She laughed. "Not of marrying you, of everything it means, of how much can still go wrong." "Nothing will go wrong. You do not know that. I know that whatever happens, we will face it together. That is enough." She kissed him then, slow and deep, and he tasted the salt of her worry and the sweetness of her hope. When they pulled apart, she said, "I love you. I love you too." They were the first time either of them had said the words aloud. They felt both enormous and inevitable, like finally naming something that had always been true. The wedding took place under the new ridgepole of the lodge, with the 10 sisters standing as Kira's family and the summer sun streaming through the open windows. Kira wore a dress her sisters had woven, green and gold thread in patterns Nathan did not recognize, but understood meant something important. Nathan wore a shirt they had made him, simple and sturdy, stitched with a border of apple blossoms. Reeve Pharaoh spoke the traditional words about partnership and commitment and shared futures. Nathan barely heard them. He was too focused on Kira's face, on the way her eyes stayed locked with his, on the small smile that played at the corners of her mouth. When Pharaoh asked if they consented to the union, they both said yes at the same moment, their voices overlapping. The sisters cheered. Pharaoh pronounced them married under the law of the land and the eyes of the community, such as it was. Nathan kissed his wife in front of her family and felt the last piece of the arithmetic click into place. 1 man, 1 woman, 10 sisters, 2 pieces of land, 1 shared life. The numbers worked. The celebration that followed was louder and longer than Nathan had anticipated. Sola had prepared a feast. Roasted lamb and fresh bread and vegetables from Nathan's garden, and a cake sweetened with honey. Someone produced a bottle of blackberry wine. The sisters sang in their own language, harmonies that made Nathan's throat tight. As evening fell, lanterns were lit throughout the lodge, turning the windows into squares of gold against the darkening sky. Nathan stood at the fence line between the 2 properties and looked back at the light. His own house was dark, but it did not feel empty. It felt like part of something larger. Kira found him there, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about, lanterns?" he said. "And how much can change because of 1 small light?" She leaned against him. "Do you regret it, any of it?" "No," he said it firmly. "Not for a moment." They stood together in the quiet, listening to the laughter from the lodge, the wind in the orchard, the ordinary sounds of a summer night. Nathan thought about the year that had passed, about the knock at his door and the desperate orc women who had appeared asking for shelter. He thought about how close he had come to refusing, to keeping his door closed and his life small. He was glad he had not, glad he had stepped aside and gestured toward the barn. Glad he had lit his brother's lantern and left it burning. "We should go back inside," Kira said. "Mara will want to make a speech, and it will be embarrassing for both of us." "That sounds perfect." They walked back together, across the fence line that no longer marked a division but a connection, toward the light and warmth and family waiting inside. Behind them, Nathan's orchard stretched quiet and dark, the trees heavy with the promise of another harvest. Ahead, the lodge glowed like a beacon, filled with voices and life. Nathan paused at the door, Kira's hand still in his, and looked back one last time. In the distance, he could just see his own house, dark and peaceful on its hill. Tomorrow he would light the lantern again. Not because he was calling for help, but because it was what his family had always done, because light was meant to be shared. Tonight, though, he had light enough right here. He followed Kira inside, into the warmth and noise and joy, and closed the door behind them. The following weeks settled into a new rhythm. Nathan woke in his own house and crossed the fence line to break his fast with Kira in the lodge. The sisters had established a rotation for cooking, and Nathan found himself eating better than he had in years. After the meal, work began. Nathan to his orchard, Kira and her sisters to their looms, but the division was never absolute. When Nathan needed help harvesting the early apples, 3 of the sisters came without being asked. When the lodge needed repairs to the chimney, Nathan brought his tools and his knowledge. The 2 properties operated less like separate entities and more like rooms in the same house, distinct but connected. The village noticed. Of course the village noticed. Nathan had not set foot in the market town of Milford since before the wedding, but the merchants who came to buy his apples brought gossip with them. Nathan Quade had married an orc. Nathan Quade was harboring a whole clan of them. Nathan Quade had lost his mind. Nathan did not care about the gossip, but he cared when it turned practical. The miller, a man named George Wickens who had been friendly with Edmund, began refusing to process Nathan's grain. The cooper who had always made Nathan's cider barrels suddenly had no availability. 2 of the merchants who had bought apples the previous year sent word that they would not be returning. Nathan absorbed each small cruelty without comment, finding new suppliers, new buyers, new ways to work. But he watched Kira's face tighten with each new rejection and knew she blamed herself. "This is because of me," she said one evening after learning that the wool merchant would no longer trade with them. "This is because people are small-minded and afraid," Nathan corrected. "It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me. If you had not married me, if we had not stayed, you would not be losing your trade. If you had not stayed, I would have lost the farm entirely. A few bigoted merchants are not worth mourning." He took her hand. "We will find others. The world is larger than Milford." They did find others, though it took time and effort and several long trips to markets farther south. The new merchants cared less about Nathan's choice of wife and more about the quality of his fruit. By autumn, Nathan had replaced most of his lost trade and the orchard was thriving. The lodge was thriving too. The sisters had completed their first commission, a set of wool blankets for a merchant in the Southern Territories who had seen their work at the Milford market before the social freeze. The payment was good, and the merchant placed an order for more. Word spread slowly, the way quality always did, and by winter the sisters had more work than they could manage alone. "We need to expand," Kira told Nathan one evening. "We have orders for spring delivery that will require twice our current capacity. Can you hire help?" "We could if we could find weavers willing to work with orcs," she frowned. "The craft requires training. It is not something we can teach quickly." Nathan thought for a moment. "What about apprentices? Young people from the village who need a trade?" "You think anyone from Milford would send their children to us?" "I think anyone from Milford who is practical will see an opportunity. Your work is excellent. Your pay is fair. You are offering something valuable." He met her eyes. "And I think you underestimate how many people in this world care more about opportunity than prejudice." Kira considered this. "We could post a notice, see who responds." They posted the notice in Milford and 3 surrounding villages. The Ember clan was accepting apprentice weavers, room and board provided, training in traditional and modern techniques. Nathan expected silence, or perhaps outright hostility. Instead, they received 4 applications. The first was from a human girl named Eliza, 16, whose family farm had failed and who needed a trade. The second was from a half-orc boy named Tam, 14, who had been rejected by every other craftsman in Milford. The third was from twin sisters, human, 17, who wanted to learn a craft their mother had practiced. The fourth was from an older woman, a widow named Joan, who had always wanted to weave but had spent her life raising children. Kira interviewed them all carefully, asking about their commitment and their reasons and their ability to work hard. In the end, she accepted all 4. The lodge expanded again, adding a dormitory wing for the apprentices and additional looms for the increased production. Nathan watched the lodge grow with quiet satisfaction. This was what he had imagined when he first suggested the land grant, not just a place for Kira's sisters to survive, but a place for them to thrive. A place that could become something larger, something that mattered beyond its own borders. The apprentices arrived in early spring. Eliza was serious and determined, her hands already rough from farm work. Tam was quiet and watchful, his green-tinged skin and small tusks marking him as an outsider everywhere he went. The twins, Clara and Catherine, were cheerful and curious, asking endless questions. Joan was patient and careful, approaching the craft with the reverence of someone who had waited a long time for it. Kira taught them with the same meticulous care she brought to everything. She showed them how to set up a loom, how to rid a pattern, how to tension the threads so they wove evenly. She corrected their mistakes gently and praised their successes sparingly. Within weeks, all 4 were producing simple work. Within months, they were contributing to the commissions. Nathan saw less of Kira during this period. She was busy teaching, managing, organizing the expanded operation. But when they did have time together, he saw a new lightness in her. She was building something that mattered, creating a legacy, offering others the stability she had once desperately needed. One evening, after the apprentices had gone to bed and the looms were silent, Nathan found Kira in the main room of the lodge, reviewing the accounts. He sat down beside her. "You are doing well," he said. She glanced up. "We are doing well. The commissions keep growing." "I meant you are doing well as a teacher, as a leader. You have built something remarkable here." Kira set down her pen. "I am trying. Some days it feels impossible. The work never stops. The problems never end. But then I look at Tam's face when he completes a pattern, or Eliza's pride when she finishes a blanket, and I remember why we are doing this." "To give them a chance," Nathan said. "To give everyone a chance." She leaned against him. "I spent so long running, so long afraid that everything would be taken away again. I am learning to stop, to build instead of flee. It is harder than I expected." "You are good at hard things," she smiled. "So are you." They sat together in the quiet lodge, surrounded by the tools of their new shared life. Nathan thought about the knock at his door, about the desperate woman who had asked for shelter. He thought about how much had changed since that night, how much had grown from that single moment of openness. "Do you ever think about that first night?" he asked. "When you arrived, all the time," Kira said, "I was terrified. I did not know if you would turn us away, if you would hurt us, if we would survive the night. And then you stepped aside and let us in." She looked at him. "Why did you?" "You had every reason to refuse." Nathan considered the question. "I think I was tired of being alone. I think some part of me knew that if I sent you away, I would regret it for the rest of my life." He touched her face gently. "I think I recognized you. You had never seen me before. Not you specifically. But I recognized the look in your eyes, the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope. I had worn that look myself for months after my family died. I knew what it felt like to need help and have nowhere to turn. He smiled. And I suppose I thought that if someone had helped me when I needed it, the least I could do was help someone else. I am glad you did. So am I. As the months passed, the operation at the lodge continued to expand. The apprentices became skilled workers. The commissions grew larger and more prestigious. The Ember clan weavings became known throughout the Southern Territories for their quality and craftsmanship. Merchants came from as far as 3 provinces away to place orders. With success came new challenges. The dormitory needed another expansion. The looms required constant maintenance and eventual replacement. Supply chains had to be managed, quality controlled, deadlines met. Kira hired a manager, one of the older sisters named Tessa, who had a gift for organization, to handle the day-to-day operations. Nathan's orchard thrived as well. With the income from the previous year's harvest and Kira's careful management of his accounts, he was able to invest in improvements. Better tools, more efficient storage, a proper cider press. He hired seasonal workers again, paying them fairly and treating them well. Slowly, his reputation recovered from the social damage of his marriage. Not everyone came around. The miller still refused his business. A few of the merchants still sneered when they saw him with Kira. But enough people cared more about quality and fairness than prejudice that Nathan's trade remained strong. 2 years after the wedding, Kira told him she was pregnant. They were in the orchard when she said it, walking between the trees in the late afternoon sun. Nathan had been explaining his plans for the spring planting, and Kira had been quiet, listening with half her attention somewhere else. Finally, she stopped and said, "I have something to tell you." He knew before she said the words. He could see it in her face, in the mixture of joy and terror, in the way her hand rested on her stomach. "When?" he asked. "Late autumn, the midwife thinks." Kira's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased is insufficient," Nathan said. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I am terrified and delighted and completely unprepared," she laughed, the sound shaky. "I feel the same." They stood there among the apple trees, holding each other, contemplating the enormity of what was coming. A child, their child. A living symbol of everything they had built together. "What do we tell people?" Kira asked. "The truth, that we are having a baby and we are happy about it." He pulled back to look at her. "Anyone who has a problem with it can take their complaints elsewhere." The pregnancy progressed normally. Kira continued working through the summer, teaching and managing and weaving. As autumn approached and her body changed, she finally stepped back from the daily operations, trusting Tessa and the older apprentices to handle the lodge. She spent more time at Nathan's house, preparing a room for the baby, sewing small clothes, reading books about childbirth and infant care that Nathan had purchased from a merchant in the Southern Territories. Nathan watched her prepare with the same meticulous attention she brought to everything, and felt his love deepen into something he had no words for. The baby came on a cold night in late autumn, 3 weeks earlier than expected. The midwife, a practical woman from Milford who cared more about coin than politics, attended the birth. Nathan paced in the kitchen, listening to Kira's cries from the bedroom, feeling helpless and terrified. When the crying finally stopped and was replaced by a different crying, thinner and higher, Nathan's heart stopped. Then the midwife opened the door and said, "You have a daughter. Both are well." Nathan stumbled into the bedroom. Kira lay propped against pillows, exhausted and pale, her hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Come meet her," Kira said softly. Nathan approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Kira pulled back the cloth and Nathan looked down at his daughter. She was small, impossibly small, with green-tinged skin and a dusting of dark hair. Her eyes, when they opened, were deep brown like Kira's. She had the tiniest tusks Nathan had ever seen, barely more than nubs, and pointed ears that lay flat against her head. She was perfect. "What should we name her?" Kira asked. They had discussed names, of course, but all the options they had considered suddenly felt inadequate. Nathan looked at his daughter, at the new life he and Kira had created, and thought about lanterns and light and the way small things could illuminate everything. "Nessa," he said. "Her name is Nessa." Kira smiled. "Nessa Quade, it suits her." Nessa was a quiet baby, watchful and alert. She nursed well and slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to observe the world from the safety of her parents' arms. Kira recovered quickly from the birth, and within weeks was back to light work at the lodge, though she now kept Nessa with her in a sling. The sisters adored Nessa. They took turns holding her, singing to her, weaving small blankets and clothes for her. The apprentices were more cautious, but even they softened around the baby. Tam, the half-orc boy, seemed particularly fascinated, watching Nessa with an expression Nathan could not quite read. "She is like me," Tam said one day, his voice quiet. "Half and half. She is like herself," Kira corrected gently. "Unique and valuable and loved." Tam nodded slowly, his eyes still on the baby. Nathan thought he understood what the boy was feeling. The hope that if this child could be accepted, maybe he could be too. As Nessa grew, the farm and the lodge continued to thrive. The apple harvest was strong, the weaving commission steady. Nathan and Kira fell into the rhythms of parenthood, sleepless nights and small victories, worries about fevers and teething and milestones. They leaned on each other, and on the community they had built, the sisters and apprentices who had become family. When Nessa was 6 months old, Reeve Farrow visited unexpectedly. He arrived on a spring morning, his face serious, and asked to speak with Nathan and Kira privately. They met in Nathan's kitchen, Nessa asleep in her cradle nearby. Farrow sat across from them, his hands folded on the table. "I have news from the provincial capital," he said. "There is a movement gaining support among the legislators, a proposal to formally recognize interspecies marriages and grant full legal protection to mixed families." Nathan felt Kira's hand tighten in his. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means that marriages like yours, which currently exist in a legal gray area, would be officially recognized. Your daughter would have full citizenship rights. Your property and inheritance would be protected." Farrow leaned forward. "It means that what you have built here would have the full force of law behind it." "Why are you telling us this?" Nathan asked. "Because the proposal needs examples, stories of successful interspecies partnerships. Evidence that these relationships can work, that they contribute to the community rather than harm it." Farrow met Nathan's eyes. "Your story, what you have built here, is exactly the kind of example the legislators need." Kira was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What would you need from us?" "Your testimony. A detailed account of how you met, how you built your lives together, the challenges you faced and how you overcame them. Permission to use your story in the legislative debates." Farrow glanced at Nessa. "And perhaps, if you are willing, an appearance before the provincial council." Nathan looked at Kira. She looked back at him, her expression uncertain. "This would make us very public," she said. "It would," Nathan agreed, "but it might also help others like us, others like Nessa." Kira's eyes went to their sleeping daughter. Nathan knew what she was thinking, about the world Nessa would grow up in, about the challenges she would face as a child of two worlds, about the possibility of making that world a little less hostile. "We will do it," Kira said finally. "We will tell our story." Pharaoh smiled. "Thank you. I believe this will make a difference." Over the next several months, Nathan and Kira worked with Pharaoh to document their story. They wrote down the details of that first night, the desperate orc women who had arrived asking for shelter. They described the harvest, the mortgage crisis, the land grant, the wedding. They documented the growth of the lodge, the success of the apprentice program, the birth of their daughter. It was strange, seeing their lives reduced to words on paper. But it was also powerful, seeing the pattern emerge. Two people who had met in desperation and built something lasting through trust and work and love. In late summer, they traveled to the provincial capital. It was Nessa's first long journey, and she handled it better than Nathan expected, content to sleep in her sling or watch the passing countryside with wide, curious eyes. The capital was larger than anything Nathan had imagined, full of stone buildings and crowds and noise. They stayed in a small inn near the government complex, and the night before their testimony, Nathan barely slept. "What if we say the wrong thing?" he asked Kira in the darkness. "What if we make it worse?" "We will tell the truth," Kira said. "That is all we can do." The council chamber was intimidating. High ceilings, rows of seats, dozens of legislators in formal robes. Nathan and Kira sat at a table facing them, Nessa in Kira's arms. Pharaoh made the introductions, then stepped back. The head counselor, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, spoke first. "Nathan and Kira Quade, thank you for appearing before us today. We understand you have a unique perspective on interspecies marriage and family life." "We do," Nathan said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "Please tell us your story. Start from the beginning." Nathan did. He told them about the lantern, about the knock at the door, about 10 desperate orc women who had asked for shelter. He told them about the harvest and the land grant and the wedding. Kira picked up the narrative, describing the lodge, the apprentice program, the community they had built. They spoke for nearly an hour, answering questions, providing details. Some of the legislators seemed genuinely interested. Others looked skeptical, their expressions closed. But they all listened. Finally, one of the younger counselors asked, "And your daughter? How do you anticipate her life will be growing up as she is?" Kira looked down at Nessa, who was awake now, chewing on her own fist. "I anticipate her life will be challenging. She will face prejudice from both communities. She will have questions about where she belongs." Kira looked up. "But I also anticipate that she will be loved fiercely by her family, that she will grow up seeing what is possible when people choose understanding over fear, that she will know, without question, that she is valued exactly as she is." The counselor nodded slowly. "Thank you for your testimony." They returned home a week later, exhausted but cautiously hopeful. Pharaoh had told them the debate would continue for months, that legislation moved slowly. But he thought they had made an impact. The seasons turned. Nessa grew, learning to sit up, then to crawl, then to pull herself upright on furniture. Her first word was mama, her second papa, her third apple, which delighted Nathan beyond reason. She was curious and fearless, exploring everything she could reach with busy hands and a determined expression. The farm and lodge continued their steady rhythm. Apprentices came and went, some staying to become full weavers, others moving on to start their own workshops. The Ember clan's reputation spread, their weavings prized across multiple provinces. Nathan's orchard produced abundant harvests, year after year, the trees thriving under his careful management. 2 years after their testimony, Pharaoh arrived with news. The Interspecies Marriage Recognition Act had passed. It would take effect the following spring, granting full legal protection to all existing and future marriages between different species. "You did this," Pharaoh told them. "Your story, your example, The legislators referenced your testimony more than any other piece of evidence. Kira looked at Nathan, her eyes bright with tears. We helped. You did more than help. You showed what is possible. Pharaoh smiled. There are already 3 more interspecies marriages in this district alone, couples who had been afraid to formalize their relationships. They all cited your example as giving them courage. After Pharaoh left, Nathan and Kira stood in the orchard, watching Nessa toddle between the trees, her small hands reaching for low-hanging apples. She was 2.5 now, talking in full sentences, asking endless questions, full of energy and joy. "Do you remember when you asked me about regrets?" Kira said suddenly. Nathan did remember, though it had been years ago. "I do. I never answered you properly." She turned to face him. "I have no regrets. Not about staying, not about the land grant, not about marrying you. Every choice led us here to this life." To her, she gestured to Nessa. "How could I regret any of it? I feel the same," Nathan said. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Every difficult moment, every challenge, every sacrifice, it was worth it." They stood together in the late afternoon sun, watching their daughter play, surrounded by the fruits of their shared labor. The orchard stretched green and thriving around them. Beyond the fence line, the lodge hummed with activity, looms clacking, voices raised in conversation and laughter. It was not perfect. There were still people in Milford who sneered at Nathan's choice of wife, still merchants who refused their business, still moments when Kira wondered if they had made a mistake. But those moments grew rarer as the years passed, overwhelmed by the abundance of everything they had built. That evening, after Nessa was asleep and the lodge had quieted for the night, Nathan lit the porch lantern. It was habit now, something he did every night without thinking. But tonight he paused, his hand on the brass, and thought about that first night, about how one small light had changed everything. Kira found him there, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. "Still thinking about lanterns, always," he said. "That lantern brought you to me. It brought all of this into being." "No," Kira said gently. "The lantern showed the way, but you opened the door. You chose to help when you could have chosen safety. That was the real beginning." Nathan turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "Then I am glad I chose well. So am I." They kissed there on the porch, the lantern glowing beside them, the orchard quiet around them, their daughter sleeping peacefully inside. It was an ordinary moment, one of thousands they had shared, but Nathan felt the weight of it. The accumulation of all these ordinary moments, all these small choices to be kind, to be brave, to be open, had built something extraordinary. He thought of Nessa growing up here, surrounded by family, both human and orc, learning that love was bigger than prejudice, that home was something you built with your own hands. He thought of the apprentices at the lodge, finding their place in the world, learning a craft and a future. He thought of the couples who had taken courage from his example, who had chosen love over fear. All of it had started with a knock at the door, with 10 desperate orc women who had asked for shelter, with a lonely man who had said yes. Nathan extinguished the lantern and followed Kira inside, into the warmth and light of their home. Tomorrow he would light it again, because that was what his family had always done, because light was meant to be shared. Because you never knew who might need it, who might be lost in the darkness looking for a sign that they were not alone. Tonight, though, he had all the light he needed right here.